I asked for a second helping of mashed potatoes at my son's dinner table, and he threw a glass of water in my face. Right there in front of his wife, my two grandchildren, and me, a 62-year-old man who'd just spent $3.2 million over 12 years making his perfect life possible. The water dripped off my chin onto my shirt, while Connor and Olivia stared in shock. "You're eating too much, Dad," Brett said calmly, like he was correcting a child. "You need to learn some self-control." I sat there soaking wet and humiliated, feeling every drop of that cold water like a slap to my dignity. But what my son didn't know was that I still held all the legal papers. "Hi, my name is Charles Anderson, and this is the story of how I taught my entitled son what empty really means. But before I tell you what happened next, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there." 12 years ago, my son Brett was 26, fresh out of college, and just had his first baby. I was 50 then, making good money as an electrical engineer, and I had one thought that consumed me. My son would never struggle like I did. I grew up poor, real poor. I remember being 8 years old, watching my father count change on the kitchen table, deciding between electricity and groceries. I swore on my mother's grave that my children would never know that feeling. So when Connor was born, my first grandchild, I made a decision that would change everything. I walked into the law office of Patterson and Associates on a cold Tuesday morning in March. The lawyer, a stern woman named Mrs. Henderson, laid out documents across her mahogany desk. "Mr. Anderson, a family trust is a powerful tool," she said, adjusting her glasses. "As the sole trustee, you maintain complete control. Your son becomes the beneficiary, but he doesn't own anything directly." I signed those papers with a pen that felt heavy in my hand. "I just want to protect my family," I told her. What I didn't know was that I was also protecting myself. Brett's wedding was the first test. $180,000. That's what Jessica wanted for their dream wedding. When Brett called me, his voice was shaky. "Dad, I know it's a lot of money, but Jessica's family expects something special. Her father's paying for half, but we need—" "Don't worry about it," I said before he could finish. "I'll take care of it." I hung up the phone and stared at my retirement portfolio on the computer screen. 40% of my savings gone in one conversation. I clicked sell on stocks I'd held for 15 years. The wedding was beautiful. Jessica looked stunning in her $8,000 dress. Brett wore a tuxedo that cost more than my first car. 200 guests ate prime rib at the country club while a 12-piece orchestra played. During his speech, Brett raised his champagne glass and said, "To my father, who always finds a way to make things happen." Everyone clapped. I smiled and waved from the head table. But something felt different about those words. Finds a way. Like it was my job. Like it was expected. I should have paid attention to that feeling. 2 years later, Connor was walking, and Brett called again. They needed a house. Not just any house. A house in Maplewood Estates, where the right kind of families lived. "Dad, the house is perfect. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, big backyard for Connor. But we need $850,000 for the down payment." I was quiet for a long time. Brett filled the silence. "Jessica's pregnant again. We need the space. And honestly, Dad, this neighborhood is important for Connor's future. The schools, the connections." That night I sat at my kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of investment statements. $850,000 meant liquidating almost everything. My retirement would be pushed back at least 10 years. But I looked at the photo on my refrigerator, Connor's first steps, arms outstretched toward me, and I made the call to my financial advisor. 3 weeks later, I handed Brett a cashier's check at the closing. He was on his phone the entire time, talking to Jessica about paint colors. "Thanks, Dad," he said, sliding the check across the table like it was a grocery list. "You're the best." The realtor called me generous to a fault. Brett's entrepreneurial phase began when Connor was 5. He'd discovered something called drop shipping and was convinced he'd found the future. "Dad, this is it. This is how our family gets really wealthy. I just need some startup capital, maybe $1.1 million to really do it right." I was 56 then, already working overtime to rebuild my retirement savings. My back ached from long hours at the engineering firm. My doctor had started mentioning words like stress and blood pressure. "What exactly would this business do?" I asked. Brett's eyes lit up. We find products from overseas manufacturers, market them online, and ship directly to customers. No inventory, no overhead. Pure profit. He showed me spreadsheets on his laptop, projected revenues, market analysis, 5-year growth plans. It all looked very professional. Brett, this is risky. What if it doesn't work? Dad, he said, putting his hand on my shoulder, when have I ever let you down? I transferred the money on a Thursday. By the following Christmas, the business had collapsed. Something about market saturation and unexpected competition. Brett never mentioned paying me back, and that was when I started keeping track of everything. When Connor turned 6, the conversation shifted to private school, Maplewood Academy, $25,000 a year per child. With little Olivia now 3 years old, we were talking about serious money. Dad, these kids need the best education, Brett explained over Sunday dinner. Public schools just aren't good enough anymore. Look at Connor. He's already reading at a 4th grade level. We can't waste his potential. Jessica nodded enthusiastically. My friend Sarah's daughter goes to Maplewood. She's already learning French and Mandarin. Can you imagine? I could imagine. I could imagine $50,000 a year for the next 12 years. I could imagine working until I was 70. But I looked at Connor, who was quietly building something with his mashed potatoes, and I thought about that 8-year-old boy, counting change with his father. How much do you need? I asked. Well, if we set up an education fund with $580,000, that should cover both kids through high school, including extras like tutoring and test prep. $580,000. I wrote the check the next week. At Connor's first Maplewood Academy parent conference, Brett introduced me to other families. This is my dad, he'd say. He's the one who makes all this possible. I shook hands and smiled. But I noticed Brett never used the word generous. He said makes possible, like I was a machine that produced money. Jessica's cancer scare happened when Connor was 8. The word tumor changes everything, even when it turns out to be benign. But the medical bills, surgery, specialists, follow-up care, they were real enough. Dad, insurance is covering most of it, but we're still looking at $85,000 out of pocket, Brett said. We were standing in the hospital parking lot. Jessica was upstairs, sleeping off the anesthesia. Of course, I said immediately, whatever you need. But then came the other expenses, the organic food diet that was supposed to prevent future problems, the wellness retreat in California, the air purification system for the house, the stress counseling for the whole family. By the end of that year, I'd written checks totaling $520,000. It's an investment in our family's health, Brett explained. You can't put a price on peace of mind. I agreed. But I started noticing something else. The thank you calls were getting shorter. The updates about Jessica's recovery were brief, almost businesslike. And when they invited me for Thanksgiving dinner, Brett handed me a bill for my portion of the catered meal. We're trying to teach the kids about financial responsibility, he said. Everyone contributes. I paid the $127.50 and said nothing. But that night, I opened a new folder on my computer. I labeled it Documentation. The requests became routine. A new BMW for Jessica, $72,000. Family vacation to Hawaii, $18,000. Connor's hockey equipment and league fees, $8,500. Olivia's piano lessons and recital dresses, $3,200. Each call followed the same pattern. Brett would explain why they needed it. I would ask how much. He would tell me. I would transfer the money. Dad, you know we appreciate everything you do, he'd say. The kids are so lucky to have a grandfather who cares about their future. But the appreciation felt hollow, scripted. When Connor turned 10, I bought him a bicycle for his birthday. Not an expensive one, just a nice Trek bike from the local shop, $400. At his birthday party, Connor unwrapped it and said, Thanks, Grandpa, but Dad already ordered me the new electric bike I wanted. It's coming next week. Brett laughed. Dad, you should have asked. Connor's been wanting that e-bike for months, but hey, now he has 2 bikes. I watched my grandson set my gift aside and return to his iPad. The electric bike cost $2,800. It was delivered the following Tuesday. That night, I called Mrs. Henderson for the first time in 3 years. I need to understand something about the trust, I told her. What exactly are my rights as the sole trustee? Last summer, Brett called about a pool. Their neighbors had installed one, and suddenly their backyard looked inadequate. Dad, it's not just about fun, it's about property value. A good pool adds $85,000 to the house value immediately. I was 61 then, officially eligible for early retirement, but nowhere near financially ready. My portfolio had been depleted so many times, it looked like a war zone. Brett, maybe this year we should... Dad, the kids are at the perfect age for this. Connor's 11, Olivia's 8. In a few years, they won't even use it. This is our window. I found myself saying yes again. $85,000 for a pool I would never swim in, at a house I visited maybe 6 times a year. The pool installation took 2 months. During that time, Brett called me exactly once to ask for an additional $12,000 for unexpected rock removal. When it was finished, they had a pool party. I wasn't invited. I drove by the house that evening and saw cars lining the street. Through the fence, I could hear laughter and music. My grandson's voice calling, "Marco!" My granddaughter giggling. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, listening to my family enjoy the pool I'd bought them. Then I drove home and made another appointment with Mrs. Henderson. 3 months ago, Brett called about Connor's bar mitzvah. They weren't Jewish, but apparently some of Connor's friends were having these elaborate coming-of-age parties. Dad, we want to do something special for Connor's 13th birthday, like a celebration of him becoming a young man. The venue costs $45,000, but it'll be incredible. Brett, I said carefully, maybe we could do something simpler this year. A nice dinner, family gathering. There was silence on the phone. Then Brett's voice, colder than I'd ever heard it. Dad, are you having money problems? Because if you can't afford to invest in your grandson's milestones anymore, just say so. Invest. That word hit me like a slap. It's not about affordability, Brett. It's about what? About being cheap now? After everything we've built together? I hung up the phone. That night, I pulled out every bank statement, every transfer record, every receipt I'd kept over 12 years. I spread them across my dining room table like pieces of a puzzle. $3.2 million. That's what I'd invested in my son's life. And for the first time, I started wondering what my return had been. The bar mitzvah was 3 weeks away. The family reunion was scheduled for 2 weeks after that. I didn't know it yet, but my education was about to be complete. Last Christmas should have been the warning I needed. I showed up at Brett's house on Christmas morning with presents for the kids. Nothing extravagant, just some books and toys I'd picked out myself. Jessica answered the door in her silk robe. "Oh, Charles, you're early." "Early? I thought you said 10 o'clock. "Did I? I meant noon. We're not really ready for..." She gestured vaguely at my shopping bags. Company. Through the doorway, I could see the living room. Connor and Olivia were surrounded by mountains of wrapped boxes, electronic gadgets, designer clothes, expensive toys I'd never seen before. "Where did all this come from?" I asked. "Oh, you know," Jessica said, not meeting my eyes. "Santa was generous this year." I knew exactly where it came from. My money filtered through their bank account, converted into Christmas magic that didn't include me. I spent Christmas morning alone, eating leftover Chinese food and watching old movies. At 3 p.m., Brett called. "Hey, Dad, sorry about this morning. Jessica was stressed about the timing. Why don't you come over for dinner?" I drove over to find them finishing dessert. My place at the table had a small plate with a slice of store-bought pie. "We saved you some," Brett said cheerfully. But there was something in his voice, something that sounded like obligation. Connor's 8th grade graduation ceremony was held at the Maplewood Academy Auditorium. I'd paid for every day of his education at that school. But when I arrived, I discovered my seat was in the back row. "Sorry, Dad," Brett said when I found them in the 3rd row. "These were the only seats available when we bought tickets." But I could see empty seats around them, reserved signs that read Anderson family. I sat in the back and watched my grandson receive his diploma. When they called his name, Brett and Jessica stood and cheered. Other grandparents in the front rows clapped politely. From the back, I clapped alone. After the ceremony, there was a reception. I watched Brett introduce Connor to his teachers, his classmates' parents, the school administrators. "This is my son Connor," he'd say. "We're so proud of how hard he's worked." When I approached to meet Connor's English teacher, Brett's introduction was different. "Oh, this is Charles, Connor's grandfather." Not my father, not the man who made this education possible. Just Charles, Connor's grandfather. The teacher shook my hand politely and immediately turned back to Brett. You must be so proud. Connor's essay about family sacrifice was really moving. Family sacrifice. I wondered if Connor had written about me. Later, I asked to read the essay. Brett said they'd have to find it somewhere. I never saw it. I started paying attention to when Brett called me. Not what he said, but when. Monday, silence. Tuesday, silence. Wednesday, hey Dad, quick question about Connor's hockey camp. Thursday, silence. Friday, silence. Saturday, silence. Sunday, hi Dad, wondering if you had a minute to talk about Olivia's dance competition. I made a chart. In 6 months, Brett called me 23 times. 21 of those calls included a financial request within the first 5 minutes. The other 2 were pocket dials. When I called him, the conversations were different. Short, distracted. Hey Brett, just wanted to see how everyone's doing. Oh, hi Dad. Yeah, everyone's fine. Connor's busy with school, Olivia's got dance practice, Jessica's working late again. We're pretty swamped. Maybe I could come over for dinner this week? This week's pretty crazy. Maybe next week? Next week never came. But when Connor's soccer cleats wore out, Brett called within an hour of discovery. Dad, I hate to bother you, but Connor needs new cleats for tomorrow's game. The sports store closes in an hour. I started testing something. When Brett called with a request, I'd say, let me call you back in an hour. 12 times I tried this. 12 times Brett called me back within 30 minutes. Dad, did you forget? About Connor's cleats. The store closes soon. It was like I'd become a customer service hotline, available when needed, ignored when not. My 62nd birthday fell on a Tuesday in September. I didn't expect a party, but I thought someone might call. Connor was at school. Olivia was at dance class. Brett was at work. Jessica was doing whatever Jessica did. By 6 p.m., I assumed they were planning a surprise dinner. Maybe they'd call at the last minute, ask me to come over for something casual. By 8 p.m., I realized no one was calling. At 9:15, my phone rang. For a moment, my heart jumped. Charles Anderson? Yes. This is Sarah from Dr. Peterson's office. We're calling to remind you of your appointment tomorrow at 2 p.m. I thanked her and hung up. At 11:30, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone buzzed. A text from Brett. Dad, can you pick up Olivia from school tomorrow? Jessica's car is in the shop. I stared at that text for 5 full minutes. Then I typed back, of course. What time? He responded immediately. 3:15. Thanks, you're a lifesaver. The next day, I picked up Olivia from school. She chatted about her day, her friends, her upcoming dance recital. Grandpa, when is your birthday? She asked as we pulled into her driveway. Yesterday, I said. Yesterday? Why didn't anyone tell me? Out of the mouths of babes. That night, I made a decision about the family reunion. The Peterson family reunion happens every 3 years at Cedar Lake Resort. My late wife's family, 38 people ranging from great-aunts to second cousins. Brett had always enjoyed these gatherings. He liked being the successful son with the beautiful wife and accomplished children. I drove up Friday afternoon, looking forward to 3 days with family, real family, people who remembered Susan, who shared stories about her childhood, who kept her memory alive. The lodge was perfect. Rustic wood beams, stone fireplaces, windows overlooking the lake. I'd offered to pay for the weekend, $8,000 for lodging, meals, and activities for everyone. Dad, you don't have to do that, Brett had said when I made the offer. I want to, I'd replied. It's important to keep the family together. When I arrived, Brett was already holding court on the main deck. Connor and Olivia were swimming with their second cousins. Jessica was sunbathing with the other wives. Charles, my sister-in-law Margaret called out, there's the man of the hour. Brett's been telling everyone about your generosity. I felt a flush of pride. Maybe I'd been too sensitive lately. Maybe Brett did appreciate everything. At dinner that night, everyone was relaxed and happy. The kids were laughing. The adults were sharing stories. Brett raised his wine glass. To my dad, he said, who makes gatherings like this possible. Everyone toasted. I smiled and waved. But something about that phrase bothered me. Makes possible. Not generous, not thoughtful, just functional. Saturday morning I was feeling nostalgic. After breakfast, I gathered the family in the main room and started sharing stories about Susan. Your grandmother would have loved seeing all the kids together like this, I told Connor and Olivia. She always said family was the most important thing. I pulled out my phone and showed them photos. Susan at our wedding, Susan holding baby Brett, Susan at Connor's first birthday party just months before the cancer took her. Tell them about the Christmas when Mom made 30 dozen cookies, Brett said, settling into a chair. For an hour I shared memories. The family listened, laughed, asked questions. Margaret cried when I talked about Susan's last Christmas. Even the teenagers put down their phones. It felt like the old days, like I mattered for something beyond my bank account. Grandpa, Connor said, I wish I remembered Grandma better. She would have been so proud of you, I told him. You have her curiosity, her kindness. What about me? Olivia asked. You have her creativity and her stubbornness, I said, tickling her. She giggled and hugged me. For that moment I felt like a grandfather again, not an ATM, not a convenience, a grandfather. But then Jessica's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and whispered something to Brett. Brett nodded and checked his watch. Dad, he said, interrupting a story about Susan's terrible cooking. Maybe we should let everyone get ready for lunch. Sunday dinner at the family reunion was served buffet style in the main dining room. All 38 of us lined up for the traditional feast. Turkey, ham, mashed potatoes, the works that reminded everyone of Susan's cooking. I was sitting between Connor and Olivia, helping Olivia cut her turkey, when I noticed the mashed potatoes were especially good. They reminded me of Susan's recipe. These potatoes are delicious, I said to Jessica, who was sitting across from me. Could I have a little more? Dad, Brett said from the head of the table, his voice carrying across the room. You've already had 2 helpings. Conversations around the table began to quiet down. People were starting to look. I know, but they really are good. Dad, you need to learn some self-control. I felt my face redden. Brett, I'm just asking for... That's when he picked up his water glass. The ice-cold water hit my face and chest in one sharp splash. It dripped off my chin onto my shirt, into my lap. The dining room went completely silent. Connor gasped. Little Olivia's mouth fell open. You're embarrassing the family, Brett said calmly, setting his empty glass down. Acting like you can't control yourself around food, at your age. 38 pairs of eyes stared at me. My shirt was soaking wet. Water was still dripping from my hair. Margaret covered her mouth with her napkin. David looked down at his plate. Even the teenagers had stopped texting. Brett, Jessica whispered. Maybe that was... No, Brett cut her off. Dad needs to understand his place in this family. He's not the patriarch anymore. He's become a burden. The words hit harder than the water. I sat there dripping wet, feeling every eye in that room on me. The water was cold against my skin, but the humiliation burned hot in my chest. Brett was still talking. I know this is uncomfortable for everyone, but someone had to say it. Dad's lost perspective. He thinks because he used to help us financially, he can act however he wants. Used to help. Like my $3.2 million in sacrifices was ancient history. He comes to family gatherings and embarrasses us with his behavior. Look at him, a grown man who can't control his appetite, who demands attention like a child. I could hear Connor's quiet breathing beside me. Could feel Olivia's small hand touch my wet sleeve. The reality is, Dad's become more of a problem than a help. He's getting older, more demanding, and frankly, it's time for him to accept his new role in this family. I started to stand up, my wet shirt sticking to my chest. Where are you going? Brett asked. We're not finished here. For a moment, I thought about defending myself, about listing every sacrifice I'd made, about explaining that I'd asked for potatoes, not a public humiliation. But I didn't. Instead, I looked around that table, at Margaret, who couldn't meet my eyes, at David, studying his napkin, at cousins who'd known me for decades, now seeing me exactly as Brett did. A burden. I folded my soaked napkin and placed it beside my plate. Excuse me, I said quietly. Behind me, I heard Brett's voice. See? He can't even handle a simple conversation about his behavior. A few people laughed nervously, but as I walked toward my room, water still dripping from my clothes, I remembered something Brett had forgotten. I still controlled everything. I spent Sunday night doing math. Not emotional math, not hurt feelings math. Real math. $180,000 for the wedding. $850,000 for the house down payment. $1,100,000 for the failed business. $580,000 for education. $520,000 for medical expenses. $85,000 for the pool, plus monthly allowances, car payments, vacation funding, emergency loans. Total, $3,247,000. I pulled up the trust documents on my laptop. Every major asset Brett thought he owned was actually held in the Charles Anderson Family Trust. The house, trust asset. The business investment, trust asset. The education fund, trust asset. Even the cars, purchased with trust funds, technically owned by the trust. I read the documents 3 times, focusing on Section 7, Trustee Powers and Discretionary Authority. The language was clear. As sole trustee, I could revoke any or all trust benefits at any time for any reason with 30 days written notice. Brett had never read these documents. I'd offered to go over them with him years ago, but he'd said, "Dad, I trust you. Just handle the legal stuff." Now I was going to handle it. I opened my laptop and started typing. Dear Brett, per the terms of the Charles Anderson Family Trust, executed March 15, 2011, I am hereby providing you with 30 days' notice of trust revocation. I wrote for 2 hours. Legal language, precise language, language that would hold up in any court. When I finished, I read it 3 times, then I printed it. Tomorrow I would drive home. I would call Mrs. Henderson. I would begin the process of taking back everything I'd given. But tonight, I was going to sleep better than I had in years. Monday morning checkout was awkward. Everyone was polite but distant. The kind of politeness you show someone who's become an uncomfortable topic. Brett helped me load my suitcase into my car. "Dad, about yesterday," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Maybe I came on a little strong. You know how I am. Sometimes I'm too direct." I nodded. "Sometimes you are. The family understands, though. Everyone knows we love you. We just want to make sure everyone's on the same page about expectations going forward." "I understand perfectly," I said. Brett looked relieved. Good, good. So we're okay." "We're fine, Brett." He smiled and patted my shoulder. "Great. Drive safe, Dad. Love you." "Love you too." I meant it. I loved my son, but love doesn't mean accepting disrespect. I drove home with classical music playing softly. Mozart's Piano Concerto No. 23. Susan's favorite. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a few minutes looking at my house. My small, modest house that I owned outright. No mortgage, no debt, no monthly payments to anyone. It felt good to be home. I walked inside, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat down at my computer. The letter was still on the screen, waiting. I attached it to an email addressed to Mrs. Henderson with the subject line, "Trust, Revocation, Urgent." Then I copied Brett's email address into the BCC field. I wanted him to receive it at the same time as the lawyer. I wanted him to understand that this wasn't an emotional decision. This was a business decision. My cursor hovered over the send button. I clicked it. Mrs. Henderson called me at 8:47 a.m. Tuesday morning. "Charles, I received your email. Are you certain about this course of action?" "Completely certain." "I need to be clear about the implications. When we revoke this trust, Brett will lose access to all trust assets immediately. The house, the vehicles purchased with trust funds, any remaining education money, everything." "I understand. He'll have 30 days to make alternative arrangements. After that, if he's living in the house, he'll be considered a tenant without a lease." "I understand." "Charles, this is irreversible. Once I file the revocation documents, there's no going back." "Are you sure you want to proceed?" I thought about Sunday lunch, about 38 people watching my son call me a burden, about 12 years of unappreciated sacrifice. "Mrs. Henderson, I've never been more sure of anything in my life." "All right then, I'll need you to come in this afternoon to sign the formal documents. Can you be here at 2 p.m.? I'll be there." "Charles?" "Yes?" "For what it's worth, you have every legal right to do this. Your son is about to learn that trust funds aren't inheritance. They're privileges." I smiled. "Yes, he is." Mrs. Henderson's office smelled like leather and legal authority. She spread the documents across her conference table like a general planning a battle. Initial here. Sign here. Date there. Each signature felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. This document revokes the trust effective immediately, she explained. This one transfers all assets back to your direct ownership. This one notifies the bank to freeze all accounts Brett has access to. I signed them all. The house will be particularly complicated, she continued. Brett's been living there for 10 years, but legally it's always belonged to the trust. Now it belongs to you again. What are his options? He can negotiate to buy it from you at current market value, probably around $1.2 million now. He can rent it from you, or he can move out. And if he refuses? Then we begin eviction proceedings. I sign the final document. Charles, your son is going to be very angry. I'm sure he will be. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the phone calls that would come, the guilt trips, the accusations. Mrs. Henderson, I've been preparing for this conversation for 12 years. I just didn't know it. The certified mail was delivered to Brett's house at 3:47 p.m. on Wednesday. I know because the tracking system sent me a confirmation. My phone started ringing at 4:23 p.m. I didn't answer. It rang again at 4:31 p.m. I didn't answer. By 5 p.m., I had 17 missed calls and 12 voicemails. I played the first voicemail. Dad, what the hell is this letter? Call me back immediately. The second, Dad, this is insane. You can't just take back everything. That's not how families work. The third, look, I'm sorry about Sunday, okay? Maybe I was out of line, but this is crazy. Call me back. The seventh, Dad, the bank froze our accounts. Connor's tuition is due tomorrow. You're going to destroy your grandchildren's futures over hurt feelings? The 12th. Fine. Don't answer. But you know what? Maybe I was right on Sunday. Maybe you are just a bitter old man who can't stand seeing his family happy. I deleted all the voicemails without listening to the rest. Then I turned off my phone. For the first time in years, the silence felt peaceful. That night, I cooked myself a real dinner. Salmon, asparagus, wild rice. A bottle of wine Susan and I had been saving for a special occasion. Well, this felt special enough. I ate slowly, thinking about the last 12 years. All those times I'd said yes when I should have said no. All those times I'd prioritized Brett's wants over my own needs. I thought about Susan. What would she have said about all this? Susan was kind, but she was also fierce about respect. She would have stopped this pattern years ago. Charles, I could almost hear her saying, you taught him that your love has no boundaries, but you forgot to teach him that your love has conditions. After dinner, I walked around my house, really looked at it. Small, comfortable, paid for. This was enough. This had always been enough. My phone was still off, but I could imagine the calls continuing, the anger, the pleading, the negotiations. Tomorrow, the real consequences would begin. Brett would have to figure out how to pay Connor's tuition, how to make the mortgage payment, how to fund their lifestyle without Dad's money. He would learn what the word useful actually meant, and I would learn what it felt like to be free. Thursday morning, I turned my phone back on. 43 missed calls, 29 voicemails, dozens of text messages. I scrolled through the texts without opening them. Words like cruel and family and mistake flashed by. I deleted them all. At 9 a.m., I called Mrs. Henderson. Charles, I assume you've heard from your son. I've seen the evidence of his attempts to contact me. He called here yesterday evening. He was agitated. He demanded to speak with me about reversing the trust revocation. What did you tell him? That I only take instructions from the former trustee, you, and that the revocation is final and legally binding. Good. He's hired his own lawyer, by the way, Jonathan Mills from Mills and Associates. They're going to challenge the revocation. On what grounds? Mental incompetence, undue influence, improper procedure, the usual attempts when someone doesn't like the legal outcome. I felt a spike of anger. After everything I'd done for him, Brett was going to claim I was mentally incompetent? Can they succeed? Not a chance. You were the sole trustee with complete discretionary authority. You followed proper procedure. You had clear reasons for your decision. The revocation will stand. What happens next? They'll make noise for a few weeks. Then reality will set in. Your son is about to discover what life costs when someone else isn't paying for it. Mrs. Henderson recommended a property management company to handle the house situation. I met with them Friday morning. Mr. Anderson, this is actually quite straightforward. The manager, a professional woman named Carol Stevens, explained. The property is yours. The current occupants have no lease agreement. We simply need to decide whether to offer them a rental agreement or begin eviction proceedings. What would a fair rental rate be? For a house of this size and location, $4,200 per month, plus utilities. I did quick math. Brett's take-home income was maybe $6,000 per month. After taxes, insurance, car payments, and basic living expenses, $4,200 for rent would be impossible. What if they want to purchase? Current market value is approximately $1.2 million. If they can qualify for a mortgage and make a down payment, we can arrange a sale. But I knew Brett's financial situation. Without the trust funding his lifestyle, he had maybe $15,000 in actual savings. No bank would approve him for a $1.2 million mortgage. Let's start with the rental option, I decided. Give them a formal lease offer. And if they refuse, then we proceed with eviction. Carol nodded. I'll draft the lease agreement today. They'll have 72 hours to accept or decline. As I left her office, I realized something interesting. For the first time in years, I was making decisions based on business sense, not family guilt. It felt remarkably clear. Monday morning, I spent 3 hours at the bank closing accounts and credit cards. Mr. Anderson, the bank manager said, I need to inform you that there were several automatic payments scheduled from these accounts. Mortgage, utilities, insurance premiums. Those payments will need to be handled by the account holders going forward. But sir, without these payments, they could face immediate service shutoffs, late fees, credit damage. That's correct. The manager looked uncomfortable. Are you sure you want to proceed? These financial disruptions could have serious consequences for your family members. Family members. Not your son who publicly humiliated you. Not the people who've been taking advantage of your generosity for 12 years. Family members. I'm absolutely sure, I said. By noon, every automatic payment was canceled. Every credit card was closed. Every account Brett had access to was frozen. My phone started ringing again around 12:30. This time, it was Jessica. Charles, the mortgage payment bounced. Our insurance was canceled. Connor's school called about the tuition payment. What is happening? Her voice was panicked, not angry. I almost felt sorry for her. Jessica, Brett will need to explain the situation to you. But Charles, we don't understand. Brett understands perfectly. Ask him to show you the letter from Mrs. Henderson. I hung up. The next call was from Brett. I didn't answer. The next was from Connor. My heart clenched, but I didn't answer. Some lessons have to be learned the hard way. By Tuesday, the calls became desperate. Dad, please, just talk to me. 5 minutes, that's all I need. I listened to this voicemail twice. Brett's voice was different now. Smaller. Scared. Dad, Connor doesn't understand why his tuition payment bounced. Olivia asked why we can't afford her dance classes anymore. What am I supposed to tell them? The truth, I thought. Tell them their father took their grandfather for granted. Dad, I get it, okay? I was wrong on Sunday. I apologize. I'm sorry. I should never have said those things. But please don't punish the kids for my mistake. But that's exactly what Brett had done for years, used the children as leverage. Every request came with an explanation about what the kids needed, deserved, would miss out on if I said no. Dad, Jessica's crying every day. She doesn't understand why you hate us suddenly. Please just call her. Explain this to her. I didn't hate them. But I was done being taken for granted. Wednesday's voicemail was different. Fine, Dad. You want to play hardball? I talked to a lawyer. This whole trust thing might not be as ironclad as you think. We'll see you in court if we have to. Thursday. Dad, the eviction notice came today. Are you really going to put your grandchildren on the street? What would Mom think about this? That one made me turn off the phone for the rest of the day. Friday afternoon, Mrs. Henderson called with an update. Brett's lawyer filed a motion challenging the trust revocation. They're claiming you lack mental capacity and that the revocation was done under emotional distress. Can they prove either of those things? Not remotely, but they can make noise and waste everyone's time. How long will this take? 3 to 6 months for the challenge to work through the system. But Charles, there's something else. They're also seeking a temporary restraining order to freeze all asset transfers until the challenge is resolved. My stomach dropped. Can they get it? Unlikely, but possible. If a judge decides there's enough question about your mental state, they might freeze everything temporarily. So Brett could potentially stay in the house and keep spending money while this drags on? For a few months, yes. I was quiet for a long time. Charles, I need to ask you directly. Are you having any doubts about this decision? I thought about Sunday lunch, about 12 years of being taken for granted, about being called useless in front of 38 people. None whatsoever. Good, because there's one more option we haven't discussed. What's that? You could sell the house immediately to a third party. Once it's sold, there's nothing for them to fight over. I smiled. How quickly could we arrange that? If you're serious, I could have a buyer by Monday. I'm serious. Mrs. Henderson called Monday morning with news. I have a cash buyer, an investment company that specializes in quick closings. They're offering $1.1 million cash, closing within 10 days. That's $100,000 below market value. Yes, but it's immediate, it's guaranteed, and it removes any possibility of your son staying in the house while fighting the trust revocation. I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds. Accept the offer. Charles, this means your son and his family will need to find somewhere else to live within 2 weeks. Yes, it does. And with their current financial situation, finding rental housing will be challenging. Most landlords require income verification, security deposits. Mrs. Henderson, are you trying to talk me out of this? No, I'm making sure you understand the full implications. I understand perfectly. My son called me useless. He said I was a burden. He announced to our entire extended family that I had no value beyond my wallet. Well, now he gets to prove he doesn't need my help. All right then, I'll call the buyer's attorney and schedule the closing. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, looking out the window at my small backyard. In 2 weeks, Brett would be homeless unless he figured out his own solution. For the first time in 12 years, his problems would be his problems. The feeling was surprisingly liberating. The closing took place Thursday afternoon at Mrs. Henderson's office. I signed papers for 45 minutes while the buyer's representatives handled their side electronically. Mr. Anderson, the title company representative said, the property transfer is now complete. The new owners will take possession Monday morning. I walked out of that office with a cashier's check for $1,089,000 after fees and commissions. More importantly, I walked out free. That evening, I called the property management company. Carol, the house has been sold. The new owners will need the current occupants out by Monday. Mr. Anderson, that's very short notice. What if they don't leave voluntarily? Then the new owners will handle eviction proceedings. But these are your family members. Carol, they stopped being my responsibility when my son decided I was useless. I hung up and immediately called Mrs. Henderson. The buyer will serve eviction papers Saturday morning if the house isn't vacated voluntarily by Friday, she reported. How do you want to handle notification? Send Brett a certified letter explaining that the house has been sold and he has until Friday to vacate. Charles, this is going to create a very difficult situation for your family. Yes, it is. A situation that will teach them the difference between being supported and being entitled. The letter was delivered Friday morning. By Friday afternoon, my phone had rung 67 times. I didn't answer once. Saturday morning, I drove by the house. A moving truck was parked in the driveway. Brett and Jessica were loading boxes, furniture, Connor's hockey equipment, Olivia's dance costumes. I parked across the street and watched. Brett looked older, tired. His movements were sharp, angry. Jessica was crying while she packed dishes into boxes. The children sat on the front steps, confused and frightened. I felt a pang of something. Not regret exactly, but sadness. This wasn't how I'd imagined my family story ending. But then I remembered Sunday lunch, the laughter after Brett called me useless, the silence from every other family member. This wasn't how I'd imagined my family story going either. At one point, Brett looked up and saw my car. We made eye contact for a few seconds. He raised his hand, not waving, but pointing at me, accusing. I started my car and drove away. That afternoon, Mrs. Henderson called. The house is empty. The new owners took possession without incident. Where did they go? I don't know. That's no longer our concern. She was right. It wasn't my concern anymore. For the first time in 12 years, Brett's housing situation was Brett's problem. I spent the weekend organizing my own house. really organizing it. Going through closets, donating clothes I hadn't worn in years, throwing away old receipts and records. In Susan's jewelry box, I found something I'd forgotten, a letter she'd written to me during her final weeks in the hospital. "Charles," it read, "you have the biggest heart of anyone I know, but sometimes I worry that you give so much. You forget to save something for yourself. Promise me you'll take care of yourself first. You can't pour from an empty cup." I sat on our bed, my bed now, and cried for the first time since her funeral. Sunday, I called my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. She was a widow about my age, someone I'd exchanged pleasantries with for years but never really talked to. "Charles, how nice to hear from you. How are Brett and the children?" "Actually, Martha, I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner sometime. I'm learning to cook for myself again, and I could use the company." "I'd love that. When were you thinking?" "How about tomorrow night?" "Perfect. Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself." It felt like a beginning. Monday morning I made a decision about my phone. I blocked Brett's number, Jessica's number, even the kids' numbers, though that one hurt. I kept Margaret's number active and a few other family members from the reunion. If there was a real emergency involving the children, someone would call me. But I was done being accessible for guilt trips, manipulation, and demands. The house felt different now. Quieter, but not lonely. Peaceful. I started taking walks in the morning. Real walks, not the hurried exercise I used to squeeze in between work and Brett's crisis calls. I bought groceries for myself, good groceries, organic vegetables, quality meat, wine I actually wanted to drink. I made doctor appointments I'd been putting off for years. Dental cleaning, eye exam, physical. At 62, I had a lot of life left to live, and I wanted to live it well. When my neighbor Martha came for dinner, we talked for 3 hours. About books, travel, our late spouses, our grown children. "It sounds like you've been very generous with your family," she said diplomatically. "Too generous," I admitted. "Sometimes the kindest thing is to let people learn independence." She understood. Margaret called Wednesday evening. "Charles, I heard about what happened with Brett and the house." "What did you hear?" "That you cut them off financially and they had to move out with almost no notice." "That's essentially correct." "Charles, what Brett said at the reunion was thoughtless, but don't you think this is a bit extreme?" I was quiet for a moment. Margaret was Susan's sister, and I'd always respected her opinion. "Margaret, let me ask you something. If someone came to your house every month for 12 years, took money out of your wallet, and never said thank you, what would you call that?" I suppose I'd call it theft." "Exactly. And if that same person then stood up in front of our entire family and announced that you were useless and a burden, what would you call that?" "Charles, the only difference between theft and what Brett did is that I gave him permission. Well, I've revoked that permission." "But the children?" "The children have 2 parents. It's time those parents figured out how to take care of them." Margaret was quiet for a long time. "I'm sorry, Charles. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten." "Now you know." Thursday, Margaret called back. "Charles, I did some asking around after our conversation, about the family reunion, about Brett's behavior over the years. And several people mentioned that that he's been taking advantage of your generosity for quite a while." "Go on." "Cousin David said Brett bragged about getting you to pay for Connor's private school. Aunt Linda said Jessica once complained that you were stingy because you only gave them $70,000 for their vacation fund instead of $100,000. My jaw tightened. I'd never heard about that complaint. "And Charles, I feel terrible about this, but at the reunion, after what Brett said, I heard Jessica laugh. She actually laughed and said, 'Finally, someone said it.' The words hit me like a physical blow. Thank you for telling me, Margaret. Charles, I'm ashamed that none of us spoke up for you. We should have. You deserve better from all of us." "Yes, I did." "Is there anything I can do?" "Just what you're doing, telling me the truth." After we hung up, I poured myself a large glass of wine and sat on my back porch until dark. Friday afternoon, Mrs. Henderson called with an update. "Brett's lawyer has withdrawn the legal challenge." "Why?" Reality set in. They did some research and discovered that family trust law in this state strongly favors the trustee's discretionary authority. They realized they had no viable case. What about the mental competency claim? Dead in the water. Your documentation is thorough, your reasoning is sound, and frankly, your son's behavior at the family reunion gives you clear justification for your decision. So it's over? Legally, yes. The trust revocation stands. All assets are officially back under your control. Your son has no legal claim to anything. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. However, she continued, I should warn you that this doesn't mean the personal pressure will stop. Your son may continue trying to contact you, may try to involve other family members in convincing you to change your mind. I understand. Charles, I've been practicing family law for 30 years. What you did was legally sound, morally justified, and frankly, long overdue. Sometimes the best thing you can do for entitled children is force them to grow up. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. Thank you for paying my fees on time. 3 weeks after the eviction, Connor called me from Jessica's mother's house. I almost didn't answer, but he was my grandson. Grandpa, it's Connor. Hi, Connor. Grandpa, we're staying at Grandma Jessica's house, but it's really crowded. Mom and Dad are fighting a lot. Dad says you took away our house and our money. My heart broke, but I'd made a decision to let Brett handle his own consequences. Connor, your father needs to explain the situation to you. But Grandpa, I don't understand. Why are you mad at us? What did we do wrong? You didn't do anything wrong, Connor. Sometimes adults make decisions that affect the whole family. But Dad says you're being mean, that you don't love us anymore. That one hurt. Connor, I will always love you and Olivia. But I can't keep giving your father money when he doesn't respect me. But we might have to change schools, and I can't play hockey anymore because we can't afford it. I closed my eyes. This was exactly the manipulation Britt had used for years. Connor, your father is a smart man with a good job. He can figure out how to take care of his family. But Grandpa... Connor, I need to go now. I love you. I hung up before he could say anything else. Then I turned off my phone and didn't turn it back on for 2 days. The following Monday, my phone rang. David, my nephew from the reunion. Uncle Charles, I wanted to check on you. I'm fine, David. Good. Look, I also wanted to apologize for what happened at the reunion. Brett was way out of line and we should have said something. Thank you. But I also wanted you to know what's been happening since then. I waited. Brett's been calling everyone from the reunion. He's trying to get family members to pressure you into restoring his trust fund. Is it working? Not really. Most people remember what he said about you. But he's telling quite a story about how you've destroyed his children's futures out of spite. And people believe him? Some do. Aunt Linda feels bad for the kids. Cousin Sarah thinks you're both being stubborn and should work it out for family harmony. I sighed. David, let me ask you something. If your son took $3.2 million from you over 12 years, never said thank you, and then called you useless in front of our entire family, what would you do? Honestly, probably exactly what you did. Thank you. Uncle Charles, for what it's worth, I think Brett needed this wake-up call. He's been coasting on your generosity for too long. I hope he learns from it. And if he doesn't, then that's his choice to make. Jessica's mother called me 2 weeks later. Charles, this is Eleanor, Jessica's mother. Hello, Eleanor. I'm calling about my daughter and her family. They're staying with me temporarily, but Charles, this situation is impossible. I'm sorry to hear that. Charles, I don't know what happened between you and Brett, but surely you can work this out. Those children need stability. Eleanor, has Brett explained to you what happened? He said you had some kind of disagreement and you cut off their funding. Did he tell you what the disagreement was about? Silence. He said it was a family matter. Brett stood up at a family reunion and announced to 38 people that I was useless and had become a burden to the family. More silence. Eleanor, I spent $3.2 million over 12 years supporting Brett's lifestyle. I paid for his wedding, his house, his failed business, his children's education, their medical expenses, their vacations, their cars. In return, he called me useless. Charles, I didn't know. Brett is 38 years old. He has a college degree and a good job. Jessica is a trained nurse. They're perfectly capable of supporting themselves. They just don't want to. But Charles, they have children. Yes, they do. And it's time they figured out how to be responsible parents instead of dependent children. Eleanor was quiet for a long time. I see your point. 6 weeks after the eviction, Brett called from a number I didn't recognize. I answered without thinking. "Dad, please don't hang up." His voice was different, defeated. "I'm listening." "Dad, I've been thinking about everything, about what I said at the reunion, about how I've treated you over the years. And you were right to cut me off. I wasn't expecting that. Dad, I've been working 2 jobs to try to keep us afloat. Jessica's working at the hospital again. We found a small apartment, nothing fancy. The kids are in public school now." I waited. "And you know what? We're managing. It's hard, but we're managing." I forgot what it felt like to actually earn what we have.
"I'm glad to hear that, Brett. Dad, I'm not calling to ask for money. I'm calling to apologize. Really apologize. What I said at the reunion was cruel and unfair. You deserved better from me. Yes, I did. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't expect you to restore the trust. I just wanted you to know that I understand now why you did what you did." For the first time in months, Brett sounded like the man I'd raised. "Brett, I appreciate you calling. Can I call you again sometime? Not for money, just to talk." "We'll see. I understand. I love you, Dad. I love you too." 8 months later, I'm living a completely different life. Martha and I have dinner twice a week now, sometimes at my house, sometimes at hers. We're taking a cooking class together at the community college. Next month, we're going to take a trip to Napa Valley.
I volunteer at the local literacy center on Thursdays teaching adults to read. It's rewarding work, and it reminds me that there are people in the world who appreciate help when it's offered. My investments have recovered nicely without the constant drain of Brett's requests. I'm actually ahead of where I was 5 years ago. I talk to Connor and Olivia once a month now. Brett calls first to make sure it's okay, and we keep the conversations light. They seem to be adjusting well to their new reality. Connor joined the robotics club at his public school and loves it. Olivia is learning guitar instead of expensive private dance lessons. Brett and I have lunch every 6 weeks or so. He updates me on his life, asks for my advice occasionally, tells me about the kids. He's never once asked for money. He talks about Jessica's nursing career, about his promotion at work, about the small victories of their independent life. I'm proud of him, actually. It took losing everything for him to find his self-respect, but he found it. Margaret calls regularly. She says the family reunion next year will be different, that people learned something from what happened. I'm not sure I'll go. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm also not the same person who used to say yes to everything. I like who I am now better. Today, I did something I've been thinking about for months. I wrote a letter to Connor and Olivia, not to give to them now, but to give to them when they're older, when they can understand the full story. "Dear Connor and Olivia," it begins. "By the time you read this, you'll be adults with children of your own. You'll understand what it means to sacrifice for family, and what it means to feel unappreciated for those sacrifices. I want you to know that everything I did, including taking away your father's trust fund, was an act of love. I loved your father enough to let him fail. I loved you enough to let your parents learn to stand on their own. Money that comes too easily is money that isn't valued. Success that isn't earned isn't really success at all. Your father learned this lesson the hard way, but he learned it. And now he's a better man, a better father, and a better provider, because he had to become those things himself. I hope you'll remember that when you're raising your own children. Give them your love, your wisdom, your time, your attention, but make them earn their independence. That's the greatest gift any parent can give. With all my love, Grandpa Charles." I sealed the letter in an envelope and put it in my safe. Someday they'll understand. Until then, I'm finally at peace.